Another press briefing, and welcome to this webinar of the Jerusalem Press Club, JPC, another press briefing in the series Israel is Alive and Kicking with Professor Eli Podeh, who will speak about the possible annexation in the West Bank, which he calls a bridge too far. Eli Podeh is a professor in the history of the Muslim peoples at the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's the president of the Middle Eastern Islamic Studies Association of Israel. He's the author of many books, including Chances for Peace, Missed Opportunities in the Arab-Israeli Conflict, which we had the opportunity of discussing at the Jerusalem Press Club when it was published. Professor Podeh will start with a short introduction, then we'll open up for Q&A. You're on mute, so please type your questions on chat and Professor Podeh will answer them. We also welcome members of Mitvim organization who are also online. Professor Podeh, please.
Thank you very much. It is, Ori, indeed a pleasure. It's not my first time, and I'm always happy to give those briefs. Now, the issue that we are discussing today is going probably to be one of the hottest issues in the near future. Obviously, we are all of us concerned with the pandemic, but it seems that with the formation of the new government, this issue is going to be paramount on the agenda. Uri mentioned the book of missed opportunities, and in that book, I dealt with opportunities in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at it from a purely theoretical point, it looks like, well, the Israeli government has here an opportunity to annex parts of the West Bank. Now, I think that it is very crucial to make a distinction between ideology and politics. I mean, if someone comes to the issue from an ideological point of view, clearly there is an opportunity to make a move. Why there is an opportunity? I think it's quite clear. First of all, the fact that Trump administration is very favorable to Israel, and it's also very important that you have a very short window here. And the window is until the elections, because no one will know what will happen. And also, it seems as of now that Biden will be elected. So it seems that there is a short span of time. And in addition, of course, the pandemic, everybody is concerned and deals with it. Although in July, the situation might improve, but nevertheless, I mean, this is a major issue. And moreover, the Arab states are preoccupied with their own problems. I mean, this is not the issue here today, but I want to remind you that maybe the numbers are not very high in the Arab world, but at the same time, speaking from an economic point of view, I mean, it's going to be a disaster because oil prices plummeted and tourism no longer exists. And these are considerations which affect tremendously the Arab state, in addition to the problems that were there already after the Arab Spring. So taking all this together, it creates seemingly an opportunity. However, and here comes to the main point, I think that if you analyze the situation from a purely logical point of view, whether it's in the interest of the Israeli government to do such a thing, then my answer is clear and simple. No, it will be a big mistake. And I think that even we can compare it to Barbara Tuchman's very well-known book on the March of Folly. And you know, folly is considered as the self-destruction act in spite of the availability of recognized and feasible alternatives. And there are alternatives. So I think that if to use another quote from Abba Eban, the legendary foreign minister, he says, history teaches us that men and nations behave wisely once they have exhausted all other alternatives. So it means that governments act stupidly on many occasions, but I think that experts, politicians around the world, they should make it clear, they should emphasize that it's not in Israel's best interest. And there are many reasons why I just make the title. And I'll say that, first of all, the possible reaction of the EU, and the EU is the largest trade partner of Israel. And I think that in general, it is true that it's not a unified organization and there are divisions, Hungary and others, which are for Israel and so on. But nevertheless, the bottom line is that the European Union, throughout history, from the Venice Declaration in 1980, was against settlements, was against the occupation and didn't recognize Israeli occupation. And therefore, it seems to me highly likely that they will respond and they will take measures and punitive measures. And it's not clear yet what exactly, but I think that they are being fed up with the Israeli policy. And then when you move to the PA, to the Palestinian Authority, well, Mahmoud Abbas already, he not only hinted, he said specifically, he said that the agreement, the Oslo agreement, he is no longer bound by the agreement. And this is only the beginning, and it is a threat. And I know that people are saying, well, they're crying wolf lots of times, and why should we take them seriously and so on. But, you know, there is a threshold. There is a certain red line that they would not or would cross. And it seems to me that coming after Jerusalem and coming after all the other issues that are raised in the last year, it seems to me that there's a big chance that something significant will come from the PA, in addition to the possibility of third intifada and other things. I want just to remind all of us that the ingredients or the conditions for an intifada are very much there. It's true that it didn't materialize for various reasons, but I think that the reasons are very much there. So what you need is a spark that will ignite the intifada. So that might be a possibility as well. And then you go to the Arab states, Jordan, Egypt, peace agreements. Now, we have to remember that in the past, in moments of crisis, what Jordan and Egypt did, they withdrew their ambassadors. That was the most hard step that they have taken so far. Now, it might be, and already King Abdullah hinted at it, that he will have to look at the peace treaty itself. Suspension, maybe. Again, a possibility. I don't think that you can know for sure. But I mean, if you are a decision maker, you have to take into account that something bad will happen to the peace treaties, and then also the possible repercussions on the relations with the Gulf countries. All of us have seen the very important progress that was made in the last year. So that will be a pity if there will be some now negative effect on this very important process that occurred. Hamas, Hezbollah, possible, violent eruption on the Lebanese border, on the Gaza border. In addition, Hamas might get closer to Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. That would be quite an irony, because the policy of the Israeli government, I was not in favor of that, but personally, but the policy of the Israeli government was to divide between the West Bank and Gaza, between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Such a step, no doubt, will bring them together to some extent, maybe a unity government, I don't know, but that is a possibility that you have to take into account. Then, what about the relations with the United States? So far, so good. I mean, as long as Trump is in power, but assuming and maybe the Democratic administration will be elected and Biden, so that might look as a problem with the new administration, because most probably, and Biden already made clear his view, they will present a different policy, which, by the way, is the traditional American policy. The traditional American policy, if you go throughout all the presidents, whether it was Republican or Democratic, they were against settlements, and they might go back to that position. And lastly, and I think that maybe from a purely Israeli point of view, it will affect the whole issue of the two-state solution and the possibility. Now, I know that many people say that, listen, it's no longer valid and so on. Personally, I don't think so. I think that it is possible, given certain circumstances, and of course, if there are willingness on both sides and so on. But this is a different discussion. But I think that any move on Israeli part, which is a unilateral move in the West Bank, will be considered as the end of the two-state solution. So what is the alternative? The alternative is what we call the one-state solution, which is, in my mind, is not a solution, is a recipe for a catastrophe. Not only that, but if we're talking about a democratic Jewish state, I mean, this is not going to be relevant unless we are talking a possibility of apartheid. And I guess that most of the Israelis would not want to go in that direction. So I think that if you try, let me just sum up, if you add up all these arguments, I think that rationally, logically speaking, this is a very bad move on Israel's part. And therefore, I would advise, unfortunately, I mean, they don't ask me, but my advice will be, don't do that. Okay, I'll stop and wait for your questions.
You mentioned Abba Eban, but there's another famous saying attributed to him, namely that the Palestinians never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And indeed, at least this is what most Israelis think, in all the attempts to reach an agreement with them, they said no. So what's wrong with this fresh approach brought by President Trump that says to the Palestinians, guys, history moves on, and if you want to be left behind, it's your problem?
Okay, first of all, about Abba Eban quote, quite funny, but that opens my book on the missed opportunities. And I was trying to look for the source, and if you look on the internet, you wouldn't find it. I mean, it's interesting because it's so famous, but nobody found the source. I found it, and actually he said it twice, once with regard to the Palestinians and once with regard to the Arab states. So first of all, he was wrong about at least a certain Arab state. And secondly, I talked with some of his associates, people like Eitan Ben-Tzur and others who worked with him, and they said, listen, he said it in a very particular time. He would not have thought that, and he would have said just the opposite today. I mean, I'm just quoting them. So let's leave it aside anyway. So, but people love, especially in Israel, they love very much this quote. Now, actually, for your question, I think that, and again, that appeared in my book, I think that the Palestinians made quite a few mistakes. I fully agree. By the way, Israel has made mistakes as well, for example, with the Arab Peace Initiative. But the Palestinians have made mistakes, and you know what? My feeling is that they realize that. And sometimes it comes to them belatedly, but for example, Mahmoud Abbas, quite a few times, he said, I'm willing to go back and to start from Olmert talks. We remember 2008, 7 and 8, and they were the most advanced talks. And Abu Mazen left at that point, and he didn't give an answer to Olmert, which was a big mistake in my analysis. But I think that at the time, they thought that Olmert's days were numbered, and they were looking for Tzipi Livni as someone who will replace him. and they will get a better terms. They were wrong, no doubt. Now, going back to Trump's plan, if I'm trying to analyze it in comparison to other peace plans, is not a good starting point. That's the main problem, because he wants to deliver something like 30% of the Area C to the Palestinians, and in such a way, I mean, make it not a very viable state. So I think that the terms of the Trump peace plan are problematic by themselves. However, I do think that both sides, you know, they should start from the beginning without any conditions. But we have also to remember that we cannot improve our position and start all over again from that point. Because in such a way, the Palestinians, they feel that they are being neglected, they are being damaged, and they are being offended by, especially by this administration, which is not considered a reliable or a fair mediator. That's the main problem, you know, because, I mean, if Trump will offer himself as a mediator, I don't think that he's a trustworthy mediator. That's the problem. In contrast to Clinton, for example, and other, Carter, for example, who played a different role. Okay.
Question, we're talking about annexation as if it's going to happen, but with Yamina out of the government and more moderate minister kind of checks and balances in the government, do you think that it's really going to happen?
This is a very good question, and I think that all of us are asking the same question. The thing is, why it came up, because I think that mainly it was Gantz, less Ashkenazi, but I mean, the statement that we heard so far gave us the impression that they might go in that direction. So they were vague, you know, they were ambiguous, they were not clear. They could have said, listen, we are very much against it. We think that this is a big mistake. We think we should act in a different way. They haven't said that. And I think that until they will say that, the possibility that they are entertaining. And also, the Blue and White Party, you know, it's a supermarket. So you can find different voices. And I'm sure that there are several voices in that party that are willing to go ahead. Now, when we talk about annexation, it's not that we have something very clear on our mind. What does it mean? Because there are different options. I mean, the most extreme one and the unlikely one is to annex the whole sea area, which is something like 60%. That would not happen, okay? So the other option, which is more likely, is annexing 30%, more or less the territory that Trump promised in his plan, and unilaterally, Israel will annex it. Another possibility is the Jordan Valley, which is something like 70%. And this is something that I think in Israel is more common, more acceptable from a security point of view, and so on. And the last option is the settlements and the area surrounding the settlement. That might be between 3 and 10%. So obviously, I mean, the reaction to each of the plans might be different. But I think that, and just I want to make it clear, that I think that even the smallest step, annexing the smallest part of the 3% or 4% is a bad decision on Israel's part.
It seems that Netanyahu wants to make the annexation, or what is called applying Israeli law to certain areas in the West Bank, his legacy. How can he step back, I mean, and not do it? What can he say to his base, to his supporters?
I think that is turning into a major problem. I think it will be even a bigger problem if they will indeed, because for the time being, it's an idea. But if they will announce it, it will be very difficult to go back. And moreover, I think that if time will pass us by, and more criticism will come from the international community, and supposedly the government will backtrack. Then people might say, listen, the international community and the Arab states, they succeeded in deterring the government. We were successful. So here comes the question of dignity and ideology, and I fully agree with you. So they might do it for spite. You know, this is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we have here foreign correspondents, you know, maybe they have seen the chapter in Larry David. I mean, it's a very famous chapter on the creation of his restaurant for spite. You know, so people sometimes they arrive at bad decisions for spite. But I think that the bottom line should be whether it's in the Israeli interest to annex any part of the West Bank. That should be the major question. And then try to give an answer. And you know what? I've read so much, I mean, in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, when the idea was firstly raised. And I see that I wouldn't say all, but I would say that most of the experts that deal with the issue, regardless of their political inclination, would say that it's a bad idea.
Professor Poder, you've been researching the Middle East for many years, and some of us who have long memory remember something called the Jordanian option.
Right.
The idea that Jordan is Palestine, basically, because most of Jordanians are Palestinians, and eventually the solution should be east of the Jordan River. Maybe this is in the back of the minds of some people who push this annexation plan.
I believe that there are people in Israel who still think and believe and hope that Jordan is the solution of the Palestinian problem. I think that it was Arik Sharon in the past and others as well. But you know what? Take, for example, Yitzhak Shamir. He was a staunch supporter of Eretz Israel Hashlema, Greater Eretz Israel, and even I would say the Jordanian option. When the Gulf crisis erupted in 1991, and there was a threat that Iraq will attack Israel or might cooperate with Jordan, he met secretly with King Hussein, and that was a very successful meeting. By the way, in contrast to a meeting after the London Agreement in 1987, that was a failure. But that was a huge success, and they really understood one another, and they personally, in 4 eyes, nobody else was there, they came to the conclusion that Israel would not threat Jordan, and Jordan will play a role in not allowing the Iraqis. Why I'm saying that Shamir understood very well the importance of Jordan for Israel. And this is why I think that I believe that most of the Israelis, and especially those who comes from the security apparatus, they understand the importance of Jordan. I think that Jordan as a viable option for the Palestinians was not relevant since, you know, the disengagement speech of Hussein in 1988. But funny enough, the PLO accepted Israel's existence already in 1988. It's a long history, but it is still true. And Israel did not accept it at that time. Israel accepted it only 5 years later in Oslo. But actually, the PLO accepted Israel's right to exist already in 1988. And since then, I think that the Jordanian option is no longer relevant. So, you know, it might be kind of a dream, but I don't think that is a dream that we should espouse or promote or in any case, support. Jordan is a very important partner of Israel. Don't pay so much attention to what is said publicly, because they have to say many things in order to satisfy and pacify the Palestinian population in Jordan, which constitutes something like more than 50%, no doubt. It is important what's going on behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, quite a lot. I mean, in terms of security cooperation and so on. But what is going to happen now, or possibly will happen now, might affect seriously Israeli-Jordanian relations. We don't want to go in that direction.
Coming back to the Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas just said yesterday, I believe, that he's severing the security cooperation with Israel. Well, he said it before a couple of times. Do you take it more seriously this time?
Yeah, as I said before, I mean, he's crying wolf for the last couple of years, so we might not treat it seriously. But what are the options he has, you know? He stands with his back, I mean, to the wall. And I don't think that he have many options. And we have also to remember that, you know, he's 82, 83, not very healthy. And the biggest question is who will succeed him? And frankly, I think we don't really know. But you know what we think? That who going to replace him is not going to be as moderate as he is. And whatever we say about Abu Mazen, we have to remember that he never supported violence as an option, and he cooperates with Israel, and that is very important. And I think that only in the absence of what we have, we can know or feel what we miss, or what we need, or what we had. And I think that for the last couple of years, I mean, the situation more or less, you know, is okay, is even good, you might say. Not in Gaza, but in the West Bank. But Abu Mazen has almost never been rewarded for his moderation by Israel, except for money here and there, okay? But I mean, big time, big issues. I mean, in terms of even some kind of disengagement from the West Bank. I'm not in favor of unilateral disengagement, you know, but I mean, because now we're talking just the opposite. Sharon, what he did was disengagement, but we are trying to annex. So this is quite the opposite. And I think that in such a way, what we are showing the other way, the other side, is that moderation does not help, does not reward you. You don't get anything for that. And I think that is a very important lesson, or not a very good lesson, you know, that we teach the other side. But this is something that I'm saying for many years, because I think that Abu Mazen, that he should have been rewarded for his moderation for many years. And we have to understand that the bottom line is a conflict between two parties. It's not going to disappear anytime soon. And there is big difference between the two sides. I mean, the bottom line is that, you know, I know that I myself and others keep repeating it all the time. But the Palestinians, eventually, what they got from the Oslo Agreement is something like 20% of the land they wanted. So now you want to take certain the 30% of the 20%. So try to get into their shoes. I mean, what people do in, I mean, the researchers in a conflict situation, they are trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other side. Try to think how he thinks, and then try to respond. And I fear that on many occasions, we, the Israelis, we do what we think is in our best interest without even trying to consider what is important for the other side, which also affects our situation as well.
Last question. You portrayed a pretty bleak picture of what might happen vis-a-vis the Arab state and the Gulf state if annexation occurs. But isn't there a balancing force, the threat of Iran, which will suppress the outrage?
First of all, let me say that I went to the worst case scenario, okay, which I think Israel has done in the past, usually, you know, going to wars, operations, taking into account the worst case scenario. So I think that when you do it during times of war and crisis, you should do it on other times as well. So it means that not necessarily everything that we have described here will transpire. But there is a good chance, and we have to take it into account. Now, the Iranian issue, we don't know. First of all, Iran is trying to flex its muscles with the whole cyber war now. But we have also taken into account what's going on in Iran with the pandemic. I mean, this is very serious, and we don't know the full picture. So no doubt, it will affect them economically one way or another, sooner or later. This is one. It already affects them in Syria. So I think, you know, a little bit trying to withdraw, less care. So we might see some change, but I fully agree that they would not backtrack from the big desire to develop a nuclear weapon. But if that will be a unifying force for the Europeans and the Arab states, I don't think so. I'm not sure. I think that we have come to a point that the Arab states and the European Union, for sure, they feel they need to do something because it goes against all what they believe in, and it goes against their policy. And they have somehow to respond. How far they will go, this is an open question. This is an open question which depends, first of all, whether Israel will decide to annex, and secondly, what is the extent of the annexation? As I mentioned before, you know, there might be differences in the response with regard to the measures or to the extent of the annexation.
Professor Baudet, thank you very much for a candid talk. Stay tuned to our next webinar today at 4 p.m. with Professor Avi Weiss, President of the Taub Center, which has just released its annual report, and he will speak about the socioeconomic situation following the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you all for being with us. See you soon.
Thank you very much.